Hey, so today we're going to understand and learn how we can use Jinja, a very powerful templating language that is used in Python frameworks like Flask and Django. My name is Mohammed, and
And my
alongside
name is George. Yeah, yep, that's it. And alongside George, and we'll be going over that. Basically, yeah, as Muhammad specified, we'll be going over a pretty widely used templating engine for Python. Jinja is leveraged in frameworks such as Flask as well as Django, and we're gonna go kind of not too deep, but kind of high level and give you some kind of use cases to use this particular engine. Go ahead, Mohammed.
So, as George said, right, we are not going to go too deep into what Jinja is, particularly because Jinja is a very simple language, but at the same time, there's not a lot of features that you need to use to get things done in Jinja, and unless you are a specialized front-end developer. So we're just focusing on the things that you might need, on a basic level and which are used a lot when you're working with Django or Flask. I've implemented a simple Flask application here just to basically go over the different Jinja concepts, and I've rendered using Flask application. I'm rendering pages for each of those rendering pages that we're basically going to uh, see. Basically the page rendered pages would be where we would be showing the different concepts. For example, one of variables h.html would show the variable concept in Jinja, so on and so forth. So without
Yeah, and but real quick, Mohammed, I just want to kind of break down the fact that we're throwing out kind of keywords and frameworks here, such as Flash or Django. But just keep this in mind. Those of you all who are not familiar with Flask or Django, right? Flask is pretty much just a lightweight framework for Python. Is mainly used for building like simple microservices. Nothing that's like enterprise level. I think you would probably. Well, I mean, let me stop there. I mean, you can use Flask for microservices on the enterprise level, right? But if you're talking about like pure web development, right? I think Django, right, is a framework, is a Python framework that has a lot more features, and you know um, it's programmed in such a way that pretty much encompasses a lot of the edge cases, etc. Um, for pure web development, right? So the long and the short of it is that if you're doing a enterprise application enterprise application or a web application rather, you want to use Django, right? If you're doing a simplified microservice, you want to get something out quick and dirty that's pretty stable and that's simple, you want to use Flask. Go ahead, Mohammed. Sorry about that.
yeah, I think that was proper perspective into Django and Flask, because you need to understand what you need to decide between what you need to leverage. So I like moving towards the topic of our video today. That's Jinja. Like for Jinja, the first one of the most important very powerful tools for Jinja is variables. Now, giving a little bit of like a tidbit of information about Jinja here. So in some ways, Jinja can leverage Python commands in a certain way within HTML files, which creates sort of a dynamic element to HTML files, which are mostly static. And usually the dynamic elements are added through JavaScript, but through Jinja, you could add those dynamic elements using Python. You don't need to learn JavaScript, but you can leverage Python to do a little bit of dynamic movement within static HTML pages. So for example, first of all is variables. So we have defined variables here, like the backend logic. If we go to the variables.html page, you'll understand here is that, you know, if you have, and I'm going to assume that most of my viewers who are looking at this video know Python, HTML to a limited extent, right? So HTML, we have these different tags, and within those tags, like this is the P tag, we have just plain strings, right, with nothing else, and anything within those tags would be rendered on the browser. So that means that we can't add any dynamic elements, but with Jinja here, we're adding something called name. If normally, if this was an HTML, it was going to say hello name, but with Jinja, which is these two curly braces. Now, these two curly braces are not like static or non-executable Jinja syntax. So we when I here on forward, whenever I say non-executable uh, uh, Jinja, Jinja syntax, that means these double curly braces that are being used. So name is a variable that we're pulling from the backend application from Python and leveraging and basically execute displaying it with an HTML file. So if we go back here, like name is a variable here under the variable root of Django, where we defined it as random. And when we're rendering the template, we're sending this name variable to the HTML file. Now, HTML does not have the ability to understand what this variable is. But when we when we refer to this variable within the double curly braces, then HTML identifies due to this Jinja syntax that this is a Python variable that we're getting, and then it basically execute is that Python variable and displays it whatever that variable is, whatever that variable that we're sending through Python is. Now, if we run this Flask application, we can go back to this page here, run variables, open that, hello random. So random is not mentioned anywhere within this piece of code, but is the value of this name variable from Python that we're getting from here. So that's how we can use variables within Jinja, which grants a lot of power to you when you're trying to create HTML pages. For example, in this use case could be, for example, when you have an application with users that register and they need to log in to their accounts. So when you usually see a welcome message within these platforms, when you log in, for example, Facebook, so on and so forth, and it says welcome and your name, that's not because they are manually writing that within HTML files for each one of their users, because there are millions of users, but because they have implemented some sort of dynamic element. I'm not saying that they're using Jinja here, but like that could be potentially be done using Jinja basically. So when someone logs in, this variable, we can pick up the name from the database and display welcome your name, like whatever that name is. So moving forward, next is the filter application. Again, where the filter is going leverages variables. So we're going to send in a variable like the previous application, and we're going to send it to the HTML file. So what do you mean by filter here? So in Jinja, when we refer to filter, we use filter to do certain actions on the variable that we're sending through. So I'm not going to go over each and every filter action that we can leverage within Jinja, but I'm just going to go over the structure on how you can execute that filter on a variable that you send to a Jinja template. So we're just going to use the upper filter here. So we use again the same double curly braces syntax of Jinja, the non-executable syntax, with the name of the variable, which is name here. Right next to it, we use the pipe, and next to the pipe, we execute what sort of filter that we need to execute on this variable. So if we go back here, it's to the app.py file. This is random with just the R being capital. The upper filter that we're applying here is going to capitalize each and every letter in the name variable. So if we go back here, open the filter, random, all of it is being capitalized. The variable that we're sending is not capitalized. There's no variable with an HTML file. There's no basically written value within the HTML tags other than the Jinja non-executable syntax. Within that, we send in the name variable, which is not completely capitalized, use a pipe, and then we use the upper filter. When Jinja evaluates that expression, it understands that it needs to capitalize all letters of the variable that is being sent in. You can look at Jinja documentation for more filters, or you can just search on ChatGPT to identify what filters we can leverage in Jinja. And this is a very powerful feature. Again, it adds a dynamic element to HTML pages, and there are a lot of different useful use cases for this. The next, I think, feature we need to go over is control. Like, so with every programming language, we know there are control statements. If else statements, for loops, while loops, so on and so forth. But HTML is, in most cases, not even a programming language, right? So it does not have these control statements. It does not have these control aspects to it. So that does create a problem for programmers in a sense, because we do have cases in where we need to display certain HTML. We need to render certain HTML aspects if certain cases are met. If not, we need to render something else. Or if we need to dynamically populate a list on HTML, that requires a for loop, and we don't have that on simple HTML. Jinja helps us resolve that problem. So with Jinja, again, as I mentioned right at the start of the video, you are able to execute certain pieces of Python code, like certain limited Python code using the Jinja syntax. But the syntax this time is different. It's not double curly braces, as you're going to see. It's going to be the executable syntax of Jinja, which is a single curly brace here with a percentage sign, and similarly a percentage sign and a closing curly brace. Like that, this is the executable Jinja syntax. So if you look at here, if you look at this case here, we're running a Python script here for item in items. Again, if we go back to app.py, if you focus here, the items is a array that we have populated in the backend code for this Flask, simple Flask application. And again, just like variable, this is also a variable, an array variable that we're sending to the HTML page using this this syntax here, just like as we did with the variables and just like we did with the filter case. So I think it's pretty much self-explanatory at this point. So we're feeding this array to this HTML page. Now we are dynamically now populating all items on the array. So if we do this statically, we'll use these li tags. If there are 4 items in the list, we're going to have 4 li tags, and we're going to manually write those li tags there. But that is going to pose a problem. Supposedly we increase by 1. That's not going to pose a problem. So you can increase by 1. But let's say you have a database of 10,000 items within an array, right? And it's constantly changing. Some people are adding new items to it. Some items are being removed every day. Now that poses a problem, because you cannot manually make those changes within the HTML file. And to handle that, in this case, we don't need to make any change. As the array changes and the array coming in here, it using this code, it loops through the item just like a Python file, and then populates different li tags based on how many items are within the array. So that's why this is a very useful way of templating within HTML. And just as a side note here, like for every control statement or that we use within Jinja, we need to make sure that we use the end followed by whatever control statement we're using. In this case, for to close that Jinja executable block out.